November 23rd, 1942. An explosion sends a single sailor, Poon Lim, into the shark-filled South Atlantic, stranded with biscuits, a water jug, and a broken flashlight. For 133 days, he battled thirst, circling predators, and scorching isolation, setting the record for the longest anyone has survived lost at sea. But what did it take to outlast the impossible, and why has no one ever beaten him? At 11:45 a.m. on November 23, 1942, the British merchant ship SS Ben Lomond shuddered under the force of a torpedo strike. The explosion tore through the hull, sending steel, steam, and bodies into the open Atlantic. Poon Lim, a steward from Hainan, China, scrambled through the chaos. There was no time for lifeboat drills or orders, just instinct and desperation. He plunged into the sea, choking on oil and salt, as the ship slipped beneath the surface in minutes. 54 crewmates vanished in the wreckage. Alone, Lim paddled through floating debris, battered by waves and the roar of the sinking vessel. After what felt like hours, his hand found the edge of a wooden raft, a battered 8-foot square bobbing in the swells. He hauled himself aboard, shivering and soaked, the horizon empty in every direction. On the raft, Lim took stock. A tin of biscuits, a jug of water, a flashlight with a broken spring, and a scrap of canvas. The vastness of the South Atlantic pressed in. No other survivors answered his shouts. The only sounds were wind, water, and the distant memory of the explosion. Poon Lim was now adrift, utterly alone, on a fragile raft in enemy-patrolled waters, with no sign of rescue and the open ocean stretching for hundreds of miles in every direction. Poon Lim's first hours on the raft demanded more than hope. They demanded calculation. He set to work, cataloging everything within reach. The raft held a 40-liter water jug, a few tins of dry ship's biscuits, a handful of sugar lumps, and a battered flashlight. Every item became a lifeline or a tool, nothing wasted. Lim broke open the flashlight and extracted its coiled spring. He bent the wire, shaping it into a crude fishing hook. The process took patience and steady hands. A slip could cost him his only chance at catching food once the biscuits ran out. For line, he stripped threads from the raft's rope, twisting them together for strength. Bait would have to wait. He rationed the biscuits, calculating how many he could eat each day without running out too soon. The water jug was precious, a finite supply to be guarded and stretched as long as possible. Lim set aside the canvas scrap, already considering how it might help him collect rainwater when the skies eventually opened. With every step, he transformed shipwreck debris into survival gear. By the end of that first day, Lim had a plan. Stretch the rations, prepare to fish, and use every scrap of material at hand. The open ocean offered nothing freely, but his ingenuity turned a handful of objects into the beginnings of a strategy for survival. Salt spray stung Poon Lim's skin as he studied the raft's canvas scrap, weighing its value against the endless blue. The water jug would last only so long. He knotted the canvas into a shallow basin, tying corners to the raft's frame, and waited for the sky to darken. When rain finally came, he sat poised, mouth open, collecting every drop that ran from the makeshift funnel. Each brief shower filled the jug by a few precious ounces. When days stretched dry, he licked dew from the canvas at dawn, stretching his water supply in a slow, careful rhythm. Food was a different battle. The first fish came after days of patient trial. Lim baited his wire hook with biscuit crumbs, then with slivers of raw fish once he had a catch. He learned the ocean's moods, watching for flickers of movement below the raft. Sometimes a bird landed, pecking at crumbs. He snatched one by hand, using its meat for bait and its blood for a desperate sip of fluid. Sharks began circling, drawn by the scent of birds and fish. Lim waited until a small one came close, then hooked it, dragging it onto the raft with all his strength. He killed it with a blow from the water jug, drank its blood for hydration, and ate what flesh he could. The taste was harsh, but the protein and fluids kept his body from failing. With every meal, Lim rationed what he had. One fish, a few sips of rainwater, a morsel of bird, stretching the cycle of hunger and thirst as far as his ingenuity would allow. Each morning, Poon Lim woke to the same endless blue, the raft creaking beneath him as the sun edged up over the horizon. He carved a notch into the wood, one for every day survived. The marks grew slowly, a silent record of time drifting by. The ritual became his anchor. Without a calendar or clock, these notches kept the days from slipping into one another, offering proof that he still existed in the world. He forced himself into a routine. At dawn, he stretched his limbs, rolling his shoulders and flexing his legs. He paced the raft's narrow planks, careful not to tip the fragile platform, determined to keep his muscles from wasting away. Exercise was more than habit, it was a line drawn against despair. Each movement reminded him that he was still alive, still fighting. The ocean offered no comfort. Days blurred into weeks, the sun burning his skin raw, salt sores opening along his arms and back. Sometimes clouds would gather and bring a brief cooling rain. More often the sky remained empty. The silence pressed in, broken only by the slap of water and the calls of distant birds. Ships appeared on the horizon now and then, distant shapes against the glare. Lim would scramble for his mirror, angling it toward the sun, flashing desperate signals. Once, a freighter passed close enough for him to see men on deck. He waved, shouted until his voice cracked, but the ship moved on, leaving only a fading wake. The sense of abandonment cut deeper than hunger or thirst. Still, Lim marked another day. He clung to his routine, fishing, rationing, exercising, watching the sky. The raft became both prison and sanctuary, and the growing line of notches on the wood was his only promise that the world beyond the horizon still existed. April brought the coast of Brazil closer, but the sea refused to let go. The air thickened with humidity, and the sky darkened without warning. A sudden squall swept across the water, hammering Poon Lim's raft with sheets of rain and gusts that threatened to tear it apart. He clung to the planks as waves broke over the sides, soaking his supplies and loosening the lashings he'd tied by hand. The canvas he'd used to catch rainwater snapped loose, spilling precious drops. Salt spray blinded him, and the raft pitched so violently that for a moment, Lim feared it would break in two. The wind howled, driving him westward, closer to land yet more exposed than ever. Every board creaked under the strain, and every crack of thunder reminded him how little separated survival from disaster. When the storm eased, the raft was battered, the horizon now smeared with the brown-green haze of coastal water. Lim's hand shook as he checked his supplies. Less food, less water, but still alive. The shoreline was near, but the ocean's final assault had nearly finished what the torpedo began. April 5th, 1943. The raft drifted in the muddy water just 9 miles from Brazil's coast, its battered frame barely holding together. Poon Lim, gaunt and sunburned, watched the horizon with fading hope. Then the distant hum of an engine broke the silence. 3 Brazilian fishermen, out from Para for the morning's catch, spotted a strange shape bobbing in the swells. A man, waving weakly from a splintered raft. They hauled him aboard with careful hands, startled by his frail body and sunburned skin. Lim could barely speak, but he was conscious, eyes searching each face with a mixture of confusion and relief. The fisherman offered water and bread, then wrapped him in spare shirts against the humid April breeze. For the first time in 133 days, Lim felt solid ground beneath his feet, if only the deck of a wooden fishing boat. As the vessel turned toward the coast, the ordeal of endless blue gave way to the promise of land. No names from that rescue are preserved in official records, but the hands that pulled Poon Lim from the sea ended the longest-known solitary survival in maritime history. Over 133 days alone on the Atlantic, Poon Lim survived longer at sea than anyone on record, a feat documented by British and Brazilian rescue reports dated April 5, 1943. His story reveals the power of ingenuity: a fishing hook made from a flashlight spring, rainwater collected by hand, and a routine that marked each passing day. Yet essential details remain elusive. The names of the fishermen who pulled him from the water are not preserved in official logs, and the full records of his raft's drift path are incomplete. Today, his record stands unmatched in maritime history, recognized by survival experts and referenced in training manuals worldwide. Poon Lim's ordeal is more than a tale of endurance. It is a reminder that resourcefulness and determination can extend the limits of human survival even when the outcome is far from certain.